We have been talking for the last 5 weeks about the idea of Christmas. Most of us recognize that Jesus is the reason for the season. That's why we gather here and we read that on banners and on cards and other things. And so when we hear reason for the season, we say to ourselves, I know what that is. But one of the reasons I kept showing you that Peanuts video over and over the last 5 weeks is because it's a great illustration that if you remember that special, you remember that Charlie Brown, that's the end. Charlie Brown starts at the beginning, not really understanding what Christmas is, and he has a lot of people tell him what it's about. He even gets involved in this big event. Does that sound like familiar? He gets involved in this big event where they basically are building Christmas so they can show other people what Christmas is. And right in the middle of it, he has a little mini breakdown where he says, does anybody know really what Christmas is all about? And Linus brings it back full circle and says, yeah, the Savior came. He reads right out of Luke. So, best case scenario, we hope that we can avoid at least our mini meltdown for the holidays, and that we can say to ourselves, remember self, you know what Christmas is all about. However, for most of us, that is the end point. We remember, wait, it's not about presents. It's not about food. It's not about busyness and running around. It's about Jesus. But then we stop there and we go, but why is it about Jesus? And why do we say it's about Jesus? And why would Jesus say that this season is about him? That's what we've been talking about over these last handful of weeks. So if you've missed those other messages, you can get those online if you'd like. Today, we're going to talk about the idea that the coming of Jesus is the reason for the season. And we're told that this will cause great joy for all the people. That's what Linus just said, those exact words. It will cause great joy for all the people. And you can see that, just read Facebook. Everybody is having great joy over Jesus and his season right now. That was a joke. Jesus himself said that we could experience his complete joy. The problem is we celebrate his coming and then we facilitate his going by setting him aside and allowing ourselves to become overwhelmed with the distractions and burdens of this life. We don't simply sing joy to the world, we bring joy to the world, just like he did. That is what the reason for the season is. The reason is Jesus came because there were people in need of rescue, and he came to be that rescuer. And those people who recognized they needed rescuing had great joy. It brought great joy to all those people, to be more specific. Just like I encouraged you earlier, until we recognize that we need rescuing, this whole idea of somebody hassling us, trying to rescue us is annoying. It seems unnecessary. Certainly not joy. But that's what we're talking about today. Joy has come. That's what Christmas means. Joy has come. He has arrived. And joy's name is Jesus. Again, in Luke 2, 9 through 11 there, it says, the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. That joy is available to you right now. That part really is that simple. So let's get into why we make it difficult. Jesus said he gave us his joy. Which seems a little bit redundant. He shows up, the angel makes this big, show about he's here, and now there's great joy for all of you. And yet Jesus shows up, and automatically there's turbulence and there's confusion and there's problems within the hearts of those that he comes to. And then at some point he finds it necessary to say in John 15:11, my joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete. I mean, if that doesn't sound like a teaser in a commercial, wouldn't you like to have a joy that you, at least in your mind, envision to be better, deeper, more durable? And And then even if you felt like in your life you've had moments of joy, would you have ever said, I'm guessing that those moments of joy were absolutely complete. There was nothing lacking in those moments of joy. And even if you thought that, maybe in our short-sighted imagination, we say, that's as good as it gets around here on this planet. That joy was as complete as it's going to get here. But then it goes away. How complete is that joy? How likely is it that that joy is his joy? But yet he says that. My joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete. Here's the problem, is that one sentence before that he says this, if you keep my commands, you'll remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Then he says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Amen. See, the whole point is to remain in his love. The point isn't, that's the problem. We're so busy, particularly, we do it in the natural and in the physical too, but we're so busy in our spiritual lives treating symptoms that we never get down to treating the sickness. That's why we don't get healed, because we're not bringing to God the sin. We're bringing to God the effects of the sin, which we'd really like to get rid of those. And we recognize that. But we don't necessarily want to get rid of the idolatry or the self-centeredness or the brokenness in us that says, if I don't gather these things right now, I'll never have. And these things are probably going to get taken away, so I need lots of them so that when some do get taken away, I still have some. I got to protect this stuff. We never get down to that deep of a level. What he's talking about is remaining connected to him, remaining close enough to him that we can be connected and just be there where he loves us. And then he says, and at that point, my joy may be in you, and your joy could be complete. C.S. Lewis said something profound. Well, yeah, only one thing, Cameron. He said a lot of profound things. This one I thought was really amazing, and it applied today. He said this, God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself, God himself, is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us a happiness and peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. That's why when he showed up, the angel could say, great joy for all the people. That's why when Jesus says, if you can keep yourself from, doing so much of these things that God himself is kind of forced to distance himself to some degree because of our sin, if we can keep that at bay by confessing, not by doing the right thing, not by earning his presence in our life, but by staying close to him, staying transparent with him, saying, Lord, I blew it again today. I blew it again today. I blew it again today. And he draws us closer to himself. And his presence in our lives gives us the desire and the ability to stay close to him. It's kind of this circle. But if you get the circle backwards, it keeps pushing you away. So what he's saying is, if you'll just stay close to me, if you just keep your face focused on mine, we'll get through this together. And so he says, if we're close, and if you're facing me, and we're connected, and we're having a relationship, then we'll have an exchange of ideas and feelings. And you will embrace some of those. And when you do, your joy will blossom. Because he's leading us down that path. He says, if you do these things, if you avoid these kind of things, if you put your heart here and not over there, he said, the reason he's saying you'll have his joy, not because he's going, here, let me give you this. Yeah, ta-da, it's magic, now you're joyful. It's not that. It's because we embrace it. It's because he says, here is something that will provide a way for you to not be so stressed out all the time. And he sets it there before you. He doesn't jam it into you. He sets it there before you, and you go, well, that looks pretty good. I'm sure that's a great deal. And at some point, I don't know if it's for you, if it's like when no one's looking, or when you don't feel needy or weak. You embrace it. And even if you're skeptical, at some point, maybe, again, when no one's looking, you try it out. And then you recognize that it starts to work. You go, wow, there might be something to this. And then he sets something else before you. And he sets something else before you. And at some point, you realize that you've embraced a good number of his practices and his ideas and his precepts, his life, his ideas, his love. And it's all in there. And then you recognize that it's him. He's given you pieces of himself. And so, of course, if he has joy in himself, now that joy is in you. And if you don't grieve the Holy Spirit by taking that and just saying, oh yeah, no, I'd like to give my life to Jesus, absolutely. And then you go off and just live your life in hideous ways that makes him want to hang his head and cry over you, that joy remains and blossoms and becomes complete. But when we say to him, what I'd really like is to not really spend any time with you. I'd really prefer it if no one around me knows that I'm associated with you. I won't deny it if they ask me, but I don't really want them finding out. And also, while you're at it, I would like to be mightily blessed and joyful. You giggle because that's offensive. And that's why, too, C.S. Lewis recognized that doesn't even exist. We're so deceived that we would say that that is something that he could give. He's not going to give you that. We were designed to run on him. There's no such thing as happiness apart from him. So if we remain in him, we can expect to maintain our joy. Jesus came for the lost, and so if we will pursue them, we remain in his love and we'll find his joy. Because when he says, if you keep my commands, if you say, you go all rich young ruler on him and you go, hey, like what commands? And he says, well, just like you've been told before, love others, love God. Those are the two commands. All the others hang on those two. Oh, okay, so I need to spend time with you, spend time with others. I need to invest in you, and I need to invest in others. I need to be where you are so that you can invest in me, and I have to be where others are so that we can invest in one another. Then we remain in his love and we'll find his joy. So here's what he said so far. He said that when Jesus arrived on this planet, joy has come. Joy showed up. Then, just to make sure that he's saying, okay, I'm here. You haven't really embraced it quite yet. So he says, I'm here, but you can have my joy. To make it more clear for us. And then he says, and let me tell you how you really do that in a practical way. He says, invest in others. That's how it shows up. Hebrews 12:2 says this, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Now, that's why, that picture is everything to your faith. But the reason it's so important is because it's a picture of difficulty, and it's a picture of sacrifice, and it's a picture of endurance and perseverance, and it's a picture of giving your life, setting aside what you want for somebody else. And the Bible calls that joy. So to some degree, we don't really understand what joy is. We think joy is la 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 la. But Jesus says that, and it says in Hebrews, it says Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. It says the one who started it all and the only one who can finish it. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Then Paul expounds in 1 Thessalonians 2, where he says to the church at Thessalonica in 2:19, what is our hope, our joy, or the crown in which we will glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? You, indeed, you are our glory and our joy. And this is what he's saying is, I mean, you know, all of those letters that Paul wrote, he went to those places. He goes to Thessalonica. He gets there. He gets connected with people. They start a small group. It becomes sort of this church-like thing. And he gets it going to the degree where he says, okay, you guys are good on your own. You got a leader. You got some team going on here. You got believers and you're connected and you're, okay, good. You can manage this for a while. I'm going to go try to do this again someplace else and I'll be in touch. Then he leaves and he writes a letter back to them and he says, you know what, here's what I hear is going right. So good job. Here are some things you could work on. And in the midst of that, he says to them, you are our glory and our joy. He's saying exactly what I just told you that he was going to say, which is that he invested in them. And because he invested in them, they are the joy that he has. I mean, Paul had fully embraced. He is basically saying, he's saying, you are my joy. I have sacrificed. I have set aside. I went out of my way. I poured into, I invested in you. Now you are my joy. To some degree, the way that you keep your joy, which is the way you keep a lot of things in the kingdom, is you got to give it away. And that is risky, and it's vulnerable, and it's difficult. To first take something, you go, wow, I was almost sure this didn't exist, and now I have it, and you want me to give it away? Because that's the only way you keep it. You give it to somebody else, or you displace it in many places. You decentralize it. It's kind of like if you have people who have a lot of money, you know, they'd say, well, I'm not going to put it all in one place. If I put it all in one place, what happens if that place goes bye-bye? You put it in many places. It's called diversification. So you put some over here and some over here and some over here. That way, if this all goes to pot, well, bless God, I still have this over here. You take that joy. If you keep it all in here and something goes wrong, which is really called any day ending in a Y, then it's just gone. You go, oh, my joy, where did it go? Well, because you were hoarding and it's all here, it's gone. If you give it away and you put some of it over here and you put some of it over here and you put some of it over there, then even when something goes bad, you go, but you know what? Over here and over here and over there, okay. There's fruit, there's investment. And you know what else happens is because it's a cyclical thing, there's a connection going on there. What happens is your joy starts draining out of you. And what happens is this, where you place this joy over here, Thessalonica writes a letter to Paul and says, hey, by the way, things are going awesome. We would have never found this joy and this Jesus without you. And you go, oh, right. That's what's important. Okay. Get my head focused again on what is truly important and where I should invest my joy. Matthew 25:21, Jesus says, let me give you a little background first. This is where he's talking about the parable of the talents, where he's saying, I'm going away, I'm going to give you a little bit, and I'm going to give you a little bit, and I'm going to give you a little bit, and do the right thing with that. And then he goes away and he comes back and he says, see, what did you guys do with what I gave you? And one comes back and says, I was afraid and you're kind of mean sometimes, and so I just hid it under the ground, and so, but I still have it, and here it is back. And then he goes to the other ones, and they say, oh, I invested it and I did things with it, and now look at all this. And he says, oh, that's great. And what we miss when we tell the few parables that parallel with that is that what he's saying is, I gave you some things, I gave you, some money, and then one of the versions, it's basically, it's a lot of money. And you can't hurt this money. You're not going to scar this money. You might just squander it. But if you will prove yourself faithful over this stuff, these things, then I'll put you over people. In the one verse he says, you've been faithful over little, now I'm going to put you over one city. And now I'm going to put you over 10 cities. You see what I'm saying? So then after he says, wow, you did a great job with this. You didn't hide it and keep it to yourself. You invested it. And then he says, well done, good and faithful servant, right? Then what does he say? Enter into the joy of your master. He says, when I put you over people, my most prized possession, I give you some money. and you'll be all right with that. I can give you these things, which you seem to be really excited about. But when I actually put you over people, you are now entering into my real joy. Now we're connected on a completely different level. I mean, we read that and we want to go, oh, that means that, after you've spent all your time here, that you haven't, messed up too much, so now you can go to heaven. But he says this is what the kingdom of heaven is like, and the kingdom of heaven has come near you. So it's not like you go, oh, good, I've graduated now, I can go out and just lounge around on clouds and learn how to play the harp. He's saying that while you're here, I'm entrusting you with my prized possession. That's how you enter into his joy. You don't want your joy. Your joy is cheap.
Amen.
And thin and fragile. His joy, that's the joy you want to enter into. Because again, and I love the language of that, because we have this prepackaged idea of joy where you think, oh, good, I'm glad they're not out of joy at Fred Meyer because I need a bunch of this. And you put it all in your cart and then you go home and you use it up. As opposed to, this it says, enter into the joy of your master. It's a presence, it's a place where you function as opposed to a commodity that you get and you use up on the inside of yourself. But if we'll have a lifestyle like this, if we would engage a lifestyle of investing in others, we can also have complete joy. But we also set an example for other believers that they can have joy, and that joy will be lasting when they do those same things. I mean, isn't that what Paul said? He said, follow my example while I follow Christ. I mean, that's kind of what we do. I mean, that's like called mentorship. It's called coaching. Sometimes it's called parenting. It's called a lot of things. I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're saying, here's how you do this. Now you do it. So if we will do those things, then people will recognize that joy that you have. We hope that they will. This is how they'd recognize it, because you're active in it. It's an active, engaged joy. And they'll recognize, too, that they don't just accept that product off the shelf and go, oh, good, joy. I was always wondering where this was. Now I got it. And then they just do this with it. That's awesome. No, they enter into it. They see that the way that you maintain it, engage it, and enjoy it is by being involved in the lives of others. So, here's what we've said so far. Joy has come. That's the reason for the season. That God became flesh, dwelt among us. Jesus says that, just in case you didn't get that earlier, you can have my joy, and my joy will be complete in you. And what I mean by that is invest in others. If we clarify, amplify all of Scripture and look at that. But then the problem is that what we are thinking when we read that and when we embrace that is that what we'll do is we'll get it. Okay, now let's set aside the whole consumerism joy thing that I've been describing. Let's assume that we're all on the same page and we have all decided that what we're going to do is recognize that there is no joy apart from Christ, no real joy, and that what that real joy means is that we'll enter into our Master's joy and invest in the lives of others and find our joy there. Even when we do that, and matter of fact, probably the moment you do that, there's likely to be resistance and there's likely to be some sort of disappointment. And we call that non-joy. You can label it however you want, but as soon as we get there, we go, oh, apparently I've spilt my joy. I've squandered my joy. It's gone. I don't know where it is, but it's certainly gone because now I'm angry and I'm upset and I'm feeling, taken advantage of, and Lord, you said I should invest in people. Well, people aren't no good, and now where's my investment now? And so I could just have Eric stand and say this, but James says, trials and suffering. James says, consider it pure joy. My brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds. So again, we have to reframe our idea of what joy is. We have to we have to include what Scripture includes, which is if God is saying through James there that it is pure joy when you have trials of many kinds, then we can't exclude trials and suffering from our definition of joy. Otherwise, what we've done is we said, okay, marriage is now this, and joy is now this. There. Now I can understand it all, and I can explain it all, because now I understand it. All I had to do is redefine it. Call it something else. That's why we have such a problem with it. We have to include trials and suffering in our definition of joy, because it's going to be there. It will absolutely be there. As long as you are here, you are bringing heaven to bear in those situations and in the lives of others. You're not coming in and dissipating the world while you're here. You don't get to do that. You get to have authority over it in Jesus, but you don't get to make it completely change. It's going to be here. It's going to be this way. As a matter of fact, scripturally speaking, it's going to get worse. It's not getting better. The shock and awe that goes around when we have these conversations in the media and on social media, I mean, it's almost as though, wow, where did we read this before? Oh, yeah, it's all through the Bible. So consider it all joy means that I have to reframe certain views as more beneficial and for my good than I currently do. We have to take some of those trials and go, you know what? This trial over here, this one stinks. I hate it. I don't like anything about it. However, this trial over here, this actually isn't bad. It doesn't feel good. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. It seems to take forever. But honestly, it's actually pretty good. We almost never grow in our successes. We grow in our testing and our trials and our difficulties and even our failures. We're not going to sit around the pumpkin pie this holiday season and lose weight while we sleep. That's not how it works. It happens when you get to the gym, and you don't get to just go to the gym and put on the cool new workout clothes that you got in your stocking. You have to actually use the machines. And if you only do it once, what happens? Well, something happens. You get sore. Yeah, if you haven't worked out in a long time and you go to the gym, the likelihood is you'll go, I didn't know I could do this many of these. Man, this is awesome. I'm killing this machine. This is this child's play. Where's the real stuff? You go home, you feel great. You're like, this is awesome. I love this. I'm going to do this every day. They say 3 times a week, but I'm going to do it every day. And then you wake up the next morning, I can't even get out of bed. And you whine to your spouse, and now I got to take a week off because now I'm kind of, I'm sore. And that week turns into 3 weeks, which turns into, why did I buy this membership? But if you will go and you'll invest there, you'll get there. And maybe I should just speak for myself. I get to the gym and I go, oh, Lord, I don't like this place. I don't like anything about it. I don't like being here. But I'm here now. That's why I do it first thing in the morning, because you know what happens? I get out of bed and I'm still basically asleep for the first 30 minutes or so. So if I can get myself to the gym, or even just in the car on my way to the gym, within that semi-sleep time, then I'm okay, because I don't really know any better yet. And then you get down there and you get to the gym and you go through your routine, you put your stuff in your locker and you get up to the machine and you're upstairs and you start working out and you go, oh no. All right, I'm already here now. There's nothing else to do. I might as well work out. And then you get through it and you go, okay, now I don't have to worry about this for a day and a half. And then you go through it again. And at some point you go, as much as I dislike this, you know what? I feel better now than if I wasn't doing it. And if I stop doing it, then it'll be really hard and I'll have to go through this whole process again. So at some point you go, you know what? As much as I wouldn't design it this way, I design it so that I just feel good all the time and I'm always in good shape, no matter how many cheeseburgers or whatever. But that's not the world. So what I need to do is I need to incorporate this into my idea of enjoyment and good and what's beneficial. So then I say, you know what, actually, and I don't say this, so I'm not insane with this anyway. I'm not saying that suddenly I love all this stuff. I'm saying, you know what? I go, okay, this is maturity. I don't really like this, but I recognize that it is good. And so I have to stop calling it, oh no, and I don't like this, and I hate going to the gym. What you have to actually start doing is, wow, now I'm cursing myself with my words. I'm actually calling this suffering when honestly it's not actually suffering. Has anybody seen that video? Maybe I should pull it out. There's this video that's been going around online where they have people in third world countries in really horrible situations saying things that we say here and calling it horrible situations. One of them is this guy standing in front of his mud hut. He's got really nothing for a house. He's standing there and he says, you know what, I hate it when I have to buy a second wireless router because my house is too big. See, that's what you read that and you go, you think, oh my gosh, I've said that, or I've done that. Or you say, oh my gosh, this house, I can't believe, I'm so sick of cleaning this house. You mean this house that you begged and pleaded for God to give you? Yeah, that one. It's just our attitude. We make it harder on ourselves. We're making it harder on ourselves. We have to rethink some of this stuff that we asked for and go, you know what, this is good, and call it good and stop calling it suffering. That way we can maintain our joy. That was my point. My point, and I do have one, is that we have to stop cursing our own joy and actually start considering things joy that we might not have because they truly are. We do that in lots of other areas of our spiritual life, and this is one that we just can't get our heads around. And when I say we, I mean me. So consider it all joy means that I must reframe certain views as more beneficial and for my good than I currently do. Tullian Tchividjian, that's just a funny, weird name, and you're thinking to yourself, what kind of new age guy is that? That is Billy Graham's grandson, and he leads one of the biggest churches in the country. And he said this recently, and it really just kind of, it's one of those things, somebody says something, you go, oh, great, I'm wrecked for the day now. He said, suffering cannot take away my joy. Only idolatry can. And we can just stop right there and just go, oh, for crying out loud, now what am I going to do with that? Because that's the real point. The rest of it is just some amplification. When we are, whatever we're labeling as suffering, even if it is that we've got some terminal health issue. I mean, honestly, in the kingdom you say, well, and we oversimplify this, and I get it. Say, well, that just means I'm going to see Jesus sooner. Yes, that's not a small thing, though. Whenever we're suffering and we lose our joy, it means that we've somehow taken umbrage against what's going on. We're taking issue with whatever's going on when we're suffering. Oh, this is horrible. I can't believe I'm going through this. What we're saying is, I shouldn't have to go through this. It's my right to not have to go through this. Somebody's going to lose their job over this. Don't you know who I am? I shouldn't have to put up with this. Suddenly we become the idol. Whatever you're setting ahead of God, that's idolatry. And so many times it's us, and that's why we don't recognize it. But if we're thinking, oh, you know what, my day was going great, and then, oh, you know, my job isn't going very good, and now I'm feeling all this pressure to keep working. But wait, I make enough money to pay my utilities and my house payment and food. Why am I feeling all this pressure? Oh, it's all the other stuff that I feel like I have to also have. Or I bought ahead of time before I had the money, and now I'm feeling this pressure. See what I'm saying? Because we set something ahead of the joy. And remember what the joy is. That's something that God has called you to, and you're investing in somebody else. Suddenly, now that joy is gone because something's higher than that. And it's insidious, and it's difficult. I'm simplifying it so we can have a conversation with, 50 different people here. But the likelihood is that we've all done something different to compromise our joy in this situation. Because for some of us, it's going to be, it could be something good too. That's the problem. You say, wait, but I'm investing in whatever it is. My marriage, my kids, my community, my job. I mean, how many times have you seen that? Watch any Hallmark movie, and that's the basis of every one of them. Somebody has invested too much into their job, saying it's for their family, and then they get all these problems and everything, and by the end they go, oh, you know what I needed to do? I just needed to invest in my family in the first place and not put the job first. Oh, and we all lived happily ever after. That's every Hallmark movie. And I know because I've watched every single... No, I'm kidding. Did you know there are like hundreds of those? Anyway. I thought there was like one or two, like one or two a year. There's like 7,000 of them or something. I think there's like 80,000 of them, really. See, it's growing every time. So what we have to actually ask ourselves is, in that suffering, when we're having trouble maintaining our joy, we have to say, what has become first place? Just have to stop and say, wait, I'm grouchy, I'm angry, and I want to blame somebody. I got to find somebody to blame. Look in the mirror and recognize that at some point, 10 steps back, you got off track probably, and say, Lord, where am I putting my hope? Am I putting it in my job? Am I putting it in other people, whether that person is my father or my spouse or my son? Where am I doing this? Where is my hope truly? So we got to keep God first, put our hope in Him, and then do what He says, which is to stay close to Him and stay close to others, investing. That's when our joy becomes complete. So to finish the quote that I have up there, that Tullian says, suffering cannot take away my joy, only idolatry can. Where is your significance and security? Are you crying out for God or against God? That's the difference between complaining and lament. Because nothing kills your joy faster than complaining. As a matter of fact, that's your acknowledgement that your joy has left the building. When you start complaining. Then you just start confirming it. Then you start cursing whatever joy you might have. And pretty soon, you're not just starting at zero, hoping you can find joy in the plus column. You're below zero here, and you're drowning, trying to get yourself back up to zero, looking up ahead, going, somewhere up there above the surface of the water that I'm way underwater. Somewhere up there above the surface is joy. And apparently that's for somebody else. Somebody who has more money, more time, that's more spiritual, whatever it is. And then we go from complaining to making excuses to actually the excuses become justifications. Then we embrace the justifications and we say, you know what? This is either what I deserve or I have a right to have this. And because I have it this way, somebody else is to blame for the fact that I have no joy. And then we work our way into bitterness. Sherry and I are taking this class with Francis Frangipan, and see what happens now. I forgot what he said that I was going to share with you. That's what happens when something happens that I haven't written down. It's not coming back to me. So, we'll just move on. In Romans 8, Paul says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. You know what he's doing there? He actually has learned how to do that reframing. He's saying honestly, I don't care what suffering you're going through, read Paul. Paul is doing what we can actually define as suffering. And he says, I consider that these present sufferings aren't worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed on us. And what Paul is not saying is these sufferings are not worth comparing, but I plan to do it anyway. You see how we do that? We say, oh, this is not worth complaining to God about, but then we do it. Bitterness is unfulfilled revenge. That's what Francis Frangipan said. Anyway. That we start blaming others, that's what I was going to say, blaming others for our lack of joy. What's happened is that we've got this in our hearts, somebody owes me something. And I'm not getting it. And until I do, I'm not going to be happy. So we have to take responsibility for that and then do what Paul is doing here and saying, these sufferings aren't worth comparing, and you know what? I will not compare them. I will not compare these things that God is using for my refinement and to bring me closer to Him. I will not call them suffering, and I will not call them trials. I'll call them good beneficial? I don't know. You don't have to call them your favorite thing ever. But we have to stop calling them suffering because we'll avoid it. That's what we build our whole lives around, avoiding suffering and inconvenience. Too difficult to get there. Better to just say, you know what? I'm going to include that in my idea of good. Jesus came to bring His joy to the world as a gift. He's inviting us to join Him in spreading that gift. If we can stay connected to Him and with those He desires to reach, and if we refuse to be discouraged by the cares of this world, then we can not only have joy, but we can bring joy to the world. Amen? Amen. Amen.